Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me on this channel. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I'm in the book of Samuel, book 2, working through chapters 8, 9, 10 and 11. These are summaries I'm going to cover, so let's begin. So as you'll know from the chapters we've just covered, and if you don't know, you can go back to the previous videos, we've learned that King David is really becoming strong now. He's defeated a lot of his enemies, and it just sets to continue in chapter 8. Now after time, David defeats the Philistines and he's got them under his control. He takes their city of Gath, which is also known as Metheg Ammah. He then carries on to defeat Moab. Now Moab is where he left his father and mother that time, but maybe they did something wrong to his family because he goes into battle with them and he writes down 2 lines, and on one side those people are to be killed and on the other side they are to live. The ones that are to live will become his servants. Next, the next battle David defeats is King Zoab. His name is Hadadziah, and he takes over the land there right up to the river Euphrates. Now he took from this king 1,000 chariots, 700 horsemen, and 20,000 foot soldiers. Now he couldn't possibly take all of those horses to the chariots with him, so he cuts all of their hamstrings bar 100 and takes 100 of them. Now the Syrians of Damascus, they come to King Zobah's aid. But David's army is so strong, they end up killing 22,000 of their men. And David ends up setting up troops in their area so that they end up becoming servants to David. Now while he's there, he takes the gold shields from King Zoab, and he also takes lots of bronze, and this is to give to the Lord. So God is really surrounding him as he goes into these battles with these enemies. Now next we hear that King Hamath hears of the death of King Zoab, and he's the king's enemy. So he is so happy that David has done this that he gets some of his messengers to take with them some gold and silver and bronze and to give that to David. And David takes that and gives it to the Lord. Now David is really making a name for himself out around the land. He has now defeated Syria, Moab, Ammon, Philistine, Amalek, and the land right up to the Euphrates River, and he's killed 18,000 Syrians in the Valley of Salt. He then sets up troops in Edom, and he then ends up with the Edomites as servants. So you can see God is surely paving the way for the Israelites to regain the land that he said was their promised land. So as we come to a close on this chapter 8, we learn that David now is the ruler over all of Israel, administering judgment and justice to all people. Now the final part in this chapter is the key people in David's government. I'll give you the roles. The only person I will name is Job, his nephew, who is the chief leader over the army. The other roles are the recorder, the priests, the foreign guards from Crete, and chief ministers. If you want to know exactly who those people are, then check out the link under this video for chapter 8 and you will find all the names laid out there. My pronunciations aren't great, so it's probably best you read them for yourself. So let's get going on chapter 9. Now David asks if there is anyone in Saul. Saul is the dead king, the first king of Israel. If there's anyone left in his household that he can be kind to, because Jonathan was his real best friend. He was like his brother, that's Saul's son. And he wants to offer kindness to anyone who could possibly remain in that household. Now Ziba is the former servant to Saul, King Saul. And he tells David, yes, there is one more remaining son of Jonathan, whose name is, brace yourself, Mephibosheth. This is the name. See if you can pronounce it. So I'm just going to call him Jonathan's son from now on. Now this son of Jonathan's is living with a man called Machir, and he lives in Ladibio. So that's where he is. And it says that he's lame-footed, so he's obviously weak on his feet. Now David calls for this son of Jonathan's to be brought to him, which he does. He comes to him, but he must have been scared because, I mean, he really should have been the next king because he's in line to be king. So he could have been worried that David is going to ask for him to be killed, or because he's his rivalry in some ways. So when he's brought forth, David repeats his name and then he says, "Here is your servant," and he sort of humbles himself. He doesn't feel worthy of being there. And David says to him, "Don't be afraid, I am going to show you kindness." And he asks him to eat with him. Now, Jonathan's son just can't believe this. He's kind of shocked, that this is something that normally a king wouldn't do. And he doesn't understand. He feels so unworthy. Now David calls forth Ziba, which was Saul's ex-servant, and he says to him, "I am going to give Jonathan's son all of Saul's land and home. It's now his, and he will eat from my table. And you and your servants will take care of his land and take care of him." So he is now brought in to Jerusalem to live alongside David with his own home, his own servants, and to be like a king, just like David. Now Jonathan's son also has a son called Micha, and so he lives with Jonathan's son in Jerusalem along with David. And it just ends saying that he had lame feet. So it's showing that he's not a strong man, he's not able to walk around freely. And that closes chapter 9. Now in chapter 10 we learn that King Nahash dies, and his son is to be his successor, which his name is Hanun. Now David had had good relations with this king. He was they both were fond of one another. So he extends this friendship to the young king who is now new, and he sends some ambassadors over to him. Now the servants of Hanun, they say to him, "Look, I don't trust this. David's sending over these ambassadors to figure out where we are to ambush us, to take over Ammon." So King Hanun, the new king, has David's ambassadors embarrassed. He does this by shaving half of their beards and then cutting a hole in their garments right around the buttock area on one side. Now these ambassadors go back to David and pass on the news, and you can imagine he's not going to be happy. But the young king realizes this, they're going to go back, and he's not going to be happy. David, and he's a warrior, he's going to probably start a war with us. So he starts getting other nations involved to come alongside him, ready for a possible wrath from David. And King Hanun was right to do so because David was angry. He does send an army out there to wage war, and unfortunately David's army are strong, and he quickly defeats them, and he does take over Ammon. And the Syrians that had tried to come in and help quickly see that they are not going to win this war. They are defeated. And this closes chapter 10. Now this is all because of a misunderstanding. These servants telling the king that David was sending men to ambush them was such a misunderstanding that they've ended up losing all of that. So this closes chapter 10. A lesson to us all in don't jump to assumptions. Now we move into chapter 11, and it's springtime. Now this is a time when they would not usually wage war, but King David has sent off his army man, Joab, his nephew, who is the head of the army, to go out and wage war, and that they're to wipe out the Ammonites and get the land of Rahab, whilst David himself, he stays at home in Israel. So one night David is out on the rooftop of his palace and is looking down, and he sees this woman bathing, and she's a beautiful woman, and he's intrigued, and he asks some of his servants to find out about this woman. And they come back to him and they tell him, her name is Bathsheba, she's Elima's daughter, and she is the wife of Uriah, who is a Hittite. And David, intrigued by this woman, has her brought to him, and they sleep together. And soon after that evening, Bathsheba sends news to David that she is pregnant. Now, knowing this, David knows clearly that he's sinned, so he's trying to cover it up, and what he does is he asks for Bathsheba's husband, who is one of his, strong men in the war out there. He's on the battlefield, so he asks for him to be brought home. And he brings him home towards him, and he just brings him there to ask him, how's the war going? How's Job doing? You know, his chief in commander. He tells him the news. And he says, look, you go home, stay with your family, because he wants him to sleep with Bathsheba, so that then the cover-up would be that he is the father of the child to be. But Uriah will not go home. He sleeps at the door of David's house. And David says, why haven't you gone home? And he's like, I can't go home with all my men on the battlefield. It's like, I can't go home and rest there while I know they are raging war. He's so loyal to them. So David then decides to send Uriah back to war, but he sends a note with him to Job. And in the note it says to him to send Uriah out into the battlefield where it's pretty gruesome, where he is in like the thick of it. And then he wants Job to pull his men back so that Uriah is killed on the battlefield. And this is exactly what Job does. He sends him out there, he goes into the battle with most valiant of men, and he is killed on the battlefield. Now news gets home to Bathsheba that she has found out her husband has been killed, and she mourns his death. But after that mourning, David calls her to be brought to him. He then marries her, and they have a child, they have a son. And we end this chapter with the Lord not being pleased at all with the way David has gone on in this situation. So that closes our chapters for today. So 4 chapters there showing us a strong leader in David, how he led his army through and defeated his enemies. Now he is sort of taking a sidestep from that. We're seeing him now staying home while his nephew Job is out there on the battlefield, and he's now getting more involved with more women, which is going down a slippery slope for him. So where this will take him, we don't know right now. We'll find out more though as we go into more chapters within the book of Samuel 2, and that will be following on soon. So thanks for being here for these 4 chapters, and we'll be back again for more soon. Take care everyone. Bye.